Have you ever scrolled through social media and felt like everyone else is secretly sitting on piles of cash while you're celebrating finally hitting four figures in savings? Maybe you've done 3 a.m. retirement math in your head, or you're checking your investment app multiple times a day, hoping compound interest performed a miracle overnight. I'm Susan, and I spend a slightly obsessive amount of time studying wealth patterns and why some people quietly build real assets while others constantly wonder where their paycheck went. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on when most Americans actually hit the big net worth milestones everyone talks about, but few openly admit they haven't reached. If you've ever wondered whether you're ahead or behind financially, this will give you clarity. Here's something surprising. Wealth building is not a neat, linear timeline. It's not graduate at 22, six figures by 30, millionaire by 65. That tidy progression looks great in presentations, but real life is far messier and more interesting. Before we break down specific ages, think about what comes to mind when you picture wealthy people. Trust fund heirs, tech founders who struck gold. In reality, most millionaires in America are surprisingly ordinary. They didn't win the lottery or marry into money. They simply understood a few core principles early. Principles rarely taught in school. And knowing when most people reach certain milestones isn't about comparison for ego's sake. It's about context. If you're improving your health, it helps to know averages. If you're raising your grades, you want to know where you stand. Money works the same way. Context helps you make smarter decisions instead of guessing. So let's start with the milestone that gets everyone's attention, reaching a $100,000 net worth. For a lot of people, reaching $100,000 in net worth feels like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops. It's the first real psychological barrier, the line between casually hoping things improve and actively building wealth. According to survey data from investment communities, the average age for hitting this milestone is just over 29. But here's the nuance. About 95% of people who get there do so by age 39. That's a full decade of variation. And before you compare yourself too quickly, remember, this data usually comes from people who actually track their finances. They're already more financially aware than the general population. In reality, many Americans carry negative net worth well into their 30s and 40s due to student loans, credit cards, and lifestyle creep, which likely pushes the broader average closer to the mid-30s. What makes $100,000 so difficult isn't just the math, though that matters. It's that you're doing most of the work yourself. At this stage, compound interest hasn't fully kicked in. The majority of that first six figures comes from your savings rate, discipline, and decisions. That's why people stall here. Progress feels slow, and it's easy to think you'll never reach bigger milestones, but here's where it gets encouraging. The jump from $100,000 to $250,000 often happens faster than expected. Many people reach $250,000 somewhere between 33 and 35. Think about that. It can take around 6 years to build the first $100,000, but only 4 to 6 more years to add another $150,000. The difference isn't luck, it's momentum. Compound interest starts doing visible work. If you have $200,000 invested and earn 8% annually, that's $16,000 in growth without adding another dollar. Suddenly, your money isn't just sitting there. It's contributing in a meaningful way. And psychologically, seeing your investments generate five-figure gains changes how you view the entire process. People genuinely start getting excited about investing when they see their balances moving by thousands per month instead of a few hundred. That's why $500,000 becomes another major turning point. Most people who reach it do so between 35 and 40. At this stage, wealth building shifts from pushing a boulder uphill to watching it roll with momentum. If you're earning 8% annually, a $500,000 portfolio generates about $40,000 a year in growth. That's comparable to a full-time salary, earned passively. Survey data suggests roughly 17% of American households eventually reach this level, meaning 1 in 6 makes it this far. And once you're there, the path to $1 million becomes much clearer, assuming you avoid major financial mistakes. The millionaire milestone remains iconic for a reason. It represents real flexibility and security. Research shows the typical age for reaching $1 million is around 49, though high earners with aggressive savings sometimes hit it in their 30s, while others cross the line in their 60s. The U.S. adds thousands of new millionaires each year. Nearly 25 million households qualify, but that's still only about 12% of the population. So it's more common than before, yet far from ordinary. What surprises people is that the jump from $1 million to $2 million usually takes far less time, often 7 to 10 years compared to decades for the first million. By the mid to late 50s, many consistent investors who started early find themselves crossing that second threshold. And this is where the acceleration becomes almost shocking. The pace after $100,000 feels completely different from the grind to get there. It's like struggling for years to build momentum, then suddenly realizing the machine runs on its own. Remember, it might take 6 years to reach the first $100,000, but only 4 or 5 more to add another $150,000. Mathematically, it's compound interest. Psychologically, it's transformation. When your portfolio earns $10,000 in a year, that's encouraging. At $20,000, you pay closer attention. But when it's generating $40,000 or $50,000 annually without extra effort, your mindset shifts. Investing stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling empowering. Instead of reluctantly saving, you actively look for ways to invest more because you see how dramatically each dollar multiplies over time. Over long horizons, a single invested dollar really can turn into many more. And once you witness that process firsthand, your relationship with money changes permanently. The jump from $250,000 to $500,000 follows that same acceleration pattern. Most people hit the $500,000 mark between 35 and 40, meaning it takes about 5 to 7 years to double from $250,000. At this level, the numbers start to feel unreal. A $500,000 portfolio earning 8% annually throws off around $40,000 in growth without you adding another dollar. That's more than the median household income in many parts of America. Your money is literally earning more than a lot of people working full-time, while you're sleeping, making coffee, or watching a show you won't even remember next month. It's passive income on another level, and it changes how you see work. The psychological shift at $500,000 is powerful. This is often when people start to feel genuinely wealthy, even if nothing about their lifestyle looks dramatic. Knowing your investments could theoretically cover your salary creates a deep sense of security. You may not walk into your boss's office and quit, but you negotiate differently. You take smarter risks. You make decisions from confidence instead of fear. Moving from $500,000 to $1 million usually takes another 5 to 10 years, with many people reaching millionaire status around 49. It sounds long, but remember, you're now doubling a much bigger base. Adding $500,000 is 5 times the original $100,000 milestone that once felt impossible. What's fascinating about being a millionaire is that it's both common and rare. There are nearly 25 million millionaire households in the US, but that's only about 12% of all households. So yes, it's more attainable than ever, yet it still puts you ahead of roughly 9 out of 10 families. And here's the wild part. The second million often feels easier than the first $100,000 ever did. Going from $1 million to $2 million typically takes 7 to 10 years, landing many people in their mid to late 50s. With $1 million invested, strong market years can generate $80,000 or more in growth. At $2 million, potential returns of $160,000 annually start entering the conversation. At that point, your investments alone could theoretically support a comfortable lifestyle. You've essentially built a personal financial engine running 24/7. But here's where it gets even more interesting: generational differences. Traditional timelines tell one story, but recent research shows wealth paths are splitting sharply. Millennials in the top 10% actually hold about 20% more wealth at age 35 than baby boomers did at the same age. Yet the median millennial has roughly 30% less wealth than the median boomer had at 35. In other words, inequality within generations has widened more than the gaps between generations themselves. The millennials who understand investing early, thanks to technology, apps, and access to financial education, are building wealth faster than any group before them. But those who don't figure it out are falling further behind than previous generations ever did at similar ages. Housing costs are a massive driver behind these generational wealth gaps. When you adjust for inflation, the median rent for 35-year-old millennials is about $1,481, compared to $1,251 for Gen X at the same age, and dramatically lower for baby boomers. The barrier to home ownership has also climbed. A 20% down payment on a median-priced home in 2024 requires roughly $86,000 versus about $69,000 for Gen X and $57,000 for boomers, inflation adjusted. That difference alone can delay wealth milestones by years. More income going toward rent or mortgages means less flowing into investments. Young adults today often feel forced to choose between buying a home and aggressively building liquid wealth, a trade-off previous generations didn't face at the same scale. Some delay home ownership to maximize investing. Others stretch financially to buy property and sacrifice portfolio growth. As people move beyond $2 million, the acceleration becomes even more dramatic. The third million often comes faster than the second, the fourth faster than the third. That's the power of exponential growth. When you hear stories about someone becoming ultra wealthy overnight, that's rarely what happened. They simply reached the stage where compound interest outpaced their ability to spend. Their investments began growing faster than their lifestyle. Understanding these timelines isn't just about comparison, though I know it's hard not to compare. It's about context. If you're 25 with $50,000 invested, you're ahead of most peers. If you're 35 with $200,000 in consistent habits, millionaire status in your 40s is realistic. But none of these timelines are fixed. Your path depends on your starting point, career decisions, risk tolerance, and life events. Some people inherit debt and start behind. Others inherit advantages. Some prioritize purpose over income. Others chase optimization. External forces matter too. Millennials born in the late 80s and early 90s walked into the job market during the Great Recession, carried record student debt, and then watched housing prices explode. It was a financial perfect storm. And yet, here's the twist. The millennials who figured out investing early are actually outperforming previous generations in certain ways. The top 10% have accumulated about 20% more wealth by age 35 than baby boomers did at the same age. Technology, investment apps, and access to financial education gave them leverage no generation had before. And here's the irony that keeps me thinking about this constantly. The same tools creating massive opportunity are also widening the gap between those who use them and those who don't. While top-earning millennials are building serious wealth, the median millennial still has about 30% less wealth at 35 than baby boomers did at the same age. The divide between those who figure out investing early and those who don't has never been wider. It almost feels like a financial caste system forming, where your 20s and 30s quietly determine whether you'll spend decades catching up or watching your money compound with increasing ease. And we have to talk about housing, because it's completely rewritten the wealth-building playbook. Previous generations could buy homes with manageable down payments and still invest on the side. Today, many young adults feel forced to choose one or the other. A 20% down payment on a median-priced U.S. home now requires close to $86,000. That's capital that could compound for decades, but instead gets locked into property that may or may not appreciate meaningfully. At the same time, rising rents make it harder to even save that down payment, trapping many people in a cycle where building ownership feels perpetually out of reach. So when we zoom out, the rough averages look like this: $100,000 around 29, $250,000 by the mid-30s, $500,000 near 40, millionaire status around 49, and $2 million sometime in the mid to late 50s. But those are just averages, not destiny. In a world where your neighbor could be secretly drowning in debt or quietly sitting on seven figures, the better question isn't whether you're perfectly on schedule. It's whether you're intentionally playing the game. Invest consistently. Avoid lifestyle inflation. Give compound interest time to work. And maybe, just maybe, resist refreshing your investment app every 5 minutes, like your financial future depends on tonight's market close.